Grab some popcorn and snacks. This is going to be a long one. In January 1988, Michael was well on his way to his 30th birthday. Despite his best-selling records, his celebrity, and his great fortune, he had recently begun to admit that he felt undervalued not only by the music industry, but by the public as well. They call Elvis the King, he complained to Frank DeLeo. Why don't they call me that? One would think that given all he had achieved, Michael would have been satisfied. He wasn't. Excuse me. Indeed, ever since he was a child, he had been taught that being number one was the most important thing he could do with his life because it was a goal he had worked toward for years. Reaching it before his 30th birthday seemed anticlimactic. After all, what was left for a recording artist to do after selling more records than any person ever in the history of popular music? Michael never strategized his career in terms of artistic development. He wouldn't imagine recording an album for any purpose other than for it to be the biggest and best ever. He needed to have his work acknowledged in a huge way, or he simply was not going to be satisfied. Perhaps such determination could be traced back to his days as a youngster when the Jackson 5 competed and talent shows when the only goal was to be the winner. That forum was Michael's original training ground. Maybe one of the reasons Michael was not respected by the public and music industry is because the masses sensed in him the lack of two essential qualities possessed by artists such as Bruce Springsteen, Bob Dylan, John Lennon, Elvis Presley: humor and humanity. It had become increasingly difficult in recent years to relate to Michael as he stood on stage in his military outfit, accepting his many awards, whispering his thanks in on a highly pitched tone, and then took off his sunglasses for a quick moment because his friend Catherine Hepburn told him to do so. It was as if he was from some another planet, not Earth. But there was still something about Michael's humility that was engaging, especially considering his many gifts. There was also still a nagging problem with his image. Certainly, his fans admired his prowess as a vocalist and his stylized genius as a dancer. He was the quintessential entertainer, but while the public could identify with many other rock stars, those whose amenity and accessibility supersede their stardom. It was unable to identify with Michael. After all, who knows anyone like Michael Jackson? After Thriller, Michael saw himself as bigger than the Beatles and more important than Elvis. They call Bruce Springsteen the boss, and he's really overrated, Michael complained. He can't sing and he can't dance. If Elvis is supposed to be the king, what about me? The fact that Michael is black complicated matters. Promoter Don King had preyed in his insecurities in 1984 during the Victory Tour by telling him, "You're the biggest superstar ever, but the white man will never let you get bigger than Elvis. Never. So you can forget that." Michael was stunned by Don's observation, so much so that he telephoned his attorney John Brackett in the middle of the night, and, without explanation, blurted out, "They'll never let me be bigger than Elvis." When John asked what he was talking about, Michael answered, "The white man, because I'm black." Joe reminded Michael that he had recently already outsold Elvis in record sales. He said that he believed Dylan had filled Michael's head with racist notions. However, for the next couple of days, Michael continued to complain about being victimized for his race until finally John became so upset he refused to speak to him. When Michael began leaving desperate messages on John's answering machine, begging expressed on how much he loved and admired him and why he left Michael to raise above the kind of racist thinking Don King propagated with his hairpin theory about Elvis and the white man. If Michael didn't get over Don's remarks, John wrote, he wasn't certain he would be able to continue representing him. That's how much such thinking hurt him. When Michael read the letter, he was moved, though he promised to try to forget Don King's words. He never really did that. Wisely, he also never mentioned the subject to John Bracken again. By 1988, Michael seemed to have a variation on the theme. He began complaining about feeling undervalued by white America, griping that he had image problem. By this time, though, no one in Michael's camp had a clue how to solve such a problem. It was a little late how to start worrying about his uniting image. Even if Norman Winter or Michael Levin, the two publicists who worked with Michael to help create the problem, could fathom a way to promote him as an accessible human artist with goals that were artistic because of just commercial, it would never work. No one would believe it. Michael simply wasn't the all that way and didn't even know how to act that way. Michael has always been myopic in his thinking about the music business. How many records were being bought by his fans? How long does it take to get a number one? How many tickets were sold? For Michael, commercialism is key, and he doesn't understand any artist who doesn't understand that. After all, Joseph dedicated himself to getting his kids out of Gary so they would have a better life, not so they would make contributions to the music industry. In his mind, Michael was still there with Joseph, trying to outdo the other acts at the Apollo. Many artists he perceived as being a threat to his dominance on the pop stars, as views with skepticism. For instance, Michael has never been a fan of Madonna, a woman who has managed to combine commercially with artistic vision because from the start she has had something she wants to communicate with her music and usually a clear-eyed vision as to how to get about it. She gives interviews, she has a point of view. After then letting me about his lost childhood and his victimization at the loss of the media, Michael has never had such of a public viewpoint about anything. He is not what one would call articulate, not by any stretch of the imagination. He's a genius on stage, but in the public's eye, he's stilted. He is constrained by his insecurity, his bashfulness, and his deep fear that he would be revealed as being less than what he would like to be for his public. Is understandable considering his life, considering the way he was raised by Joseph to think so little about himself. She just isn't that good, Michael told one associate of Madonna. Let's face it, she can't sing. She's just an okay dancer. What does she do best? She knows how to market herself. That's about it. In 1989, Madonna was named Artist of the Decade by many newspaper and magazine polls. Warner Brothers, her record label, even paid for an advertisement in one of the industry trade publications pronouncing Madonna Artist of the Decade. It was a kind of empty compliment record labels often give their all artists and paid promotions, but Michael was licensed by it just the same. He telephoned John Brecker and Frank DeLeo and complained that Madonna didn't deserve such an award. It makes me look bad. I'm the artist of the decade, aren't I? Did she outsell Thriller? Michael asked, his vast insecurity coming forth. No, she did not, Michael said. John, who lately was in the business of problem solving for Michael, suggested that he could approach MTV with the idea of a fictional award. Off the top of his head, John came up with something he called the Via Vanguard Artist of the Decade Award. That title sure sounded impressive to Michael. He was happy again. That'll teach the FIFA, he said, speaking of Madonna. And it so came to pass that at the MTV Awards in 1989, Michael was presented with the Video Vanguard Artist of the Decade trophy. Pierre Gabriel hadn't ordered the offer. Certainly not the most meaningless award ever offered to such a festivity, but said, and that was given to a fellow who recently wanted people to know he deserved it. To this day, the Michael Jackson Video Vanguard Award is presented to artists who excel in that medium, a testament not so much to Michael's amazing videos, but to John Brecka's amazing ability to placate his client. It's ironic considering Michael's obsession with Elvis Presley that John Breca represented the Presley estate. John once mentioned to Frank Delia that Elvis used to give his trusted employees Cadillacs. He suggested to Frank that it was time for Michael to start taking care of his trusted associates in that same fashion, especially considering all of the bullets John had dodged in Michael's behalf over the years. John was only half joking. Who will want a new car? Hey Johnny, that's a damn good idea, Frank said, seriously. Later, Frank had a talk with Michael. Hey Mike, listen up. You think you're as good as Elvis? Yeah, I do. Of course I do, Michael answered. Well, you know what? Michael used to give his people Cadillacs, Frank said. You're a little cheap sometimes, Mike, Frank added with a grin. He nudged him, good naturedly. What do you mean cheap? Michael asked defensively. Well, hey Mike, you got sort of reputation. No big deal. Let's change the subject. Frank had planted the seed. A few months later, when Michael and John Brecker were in London negotiating the ATV acquisition, Michael said to him, Brecca, if you get me the Beatles catalog, I'll buy you any car you want, just like Elvis could have done. Including a Rolls Royce? You got it, Michael said. Of course, John Brecca later brilliantly closed the deal, and Michael bought him that Rolls. The only problem is that he didn't buy one for Frank DeLeo. Frank was on the phone to John as soon as Michael told him he had bought him a car. He got a Rolls Royce? DeLeo asked, bewildered. I can't believe this. It was my idea. And he ended up with the Rolls. The two had a good laugh. Finally, Frank got Rolls for Michael as well. Both guys had played Michael. No doubt about that. John observed John deserved that a vehicle that much was clear, if only for clearing the way for Thriller to be released. Both the album and the video. One has to wonder about Frank DeLeo though, considering the undeniable damage he had done to Michael's image. However, in truth, he was doing exactly um excuse me, how Michael asked him to do. So yes, he probably deserves a Rolls Royce too. On February 23rd, 1988, Michael Jackson brought the Bad Tour to the United States for the first time at the Kempton Arena in Kansas City, Missouri. By this time, the three singles released from Bad, I Just Can't Stop Loving You, Bad, and The Way You Make Me Feel had all gone to number one. Michael was in good spirits, especially since Frank DeLay predicted that there would probably be two more number one hits. Before the show, the Jackson crew unloaded 8 truckloads of equipment, including 700 lights, 100 speakers, a massive stage, 2 huge video screens, and 85 costumes. On the night of the concert, banks of floodlights rose from the stage, bathing the audience in blinding white light before he appeared frozen still on stage in a line of dancers, dressed in a black Toreador's outfit with buckles down the trouser seams. Michael exploded as a supernova of energy and motion to the strains of the opening number, Wanna Be Starting Something. There are starlight and great noise effects, both like multicolored laser beams, smoke bombs, and explosions, all of which were effective and loud. There was also plenty of shtick. Michael disappearing from one side of the stage and reappearing on the other in a puff of smoke. Buckle swinging out over the audience and boom crane during Beat It. In terms of pure stagecraft and showmanship, it was impossible to fault Michael and his huge supporting cast, including four male dancers who took the place of Michael's brothers. In this show, Michael also became more sexually suggestive. He grabbed his crotch at least 5 times during the opening number, his ungloved hand hovering his groin during most of Heartbreak Hotel, Bad, and Beat It, as an odd gesture coming from someone like Michael. But the 17,000 mostly middle-class white fans seemed to love it. The audience was on its feet for the entire slick, demanding 2-hour performance. Every time Michael moonwalked across the stage, the audience would cheer and Michael's face would light up. It was clear that he still enjoyed performing. The world superstar became meaningless compared with the power and grace parrying from the stage, wrote Gregory Sendo, who reviewed the concert for the Los Angeles Herald Examiner. Luckily, Michael was in terrific shape. His voice teacher, Seth Briggs, traveled with him for much of the tour. He's a high tenor with a 3.5 octave range, Briggs said. He goes from basso low E up to G and A flat above high C. A lot of people think it's a falsetto, but it's not. It's all connected, which is remarkable. During his vocal exercises, he would put his arms up in the air and start spinning while holding a note. I asked him why he was doing that, and he said, I have to do it on stage, so I wanted to make it as sure as possible. I never seen anything like that before. I thought maybe I should stop him so he can concentrate on his voice now and dance later. But I figure if he can do it, let him do it. A good third of the show consisted of material Michael and his brothers had used in Kansas City 4 years earlier when the Victory Tour opened, right down to some of the dialogue. This time, though, Michael performed Thriller and his lad, complete with werewolf mask and the kind of high school jacket he wore in the video, now that he no longer considers himself a Jehovah's Witness. When Catherine and Joseph saw the show, they were distributed by it. He should have had his brothers with him, Joseph said, not letting go of the idea. What the hell's the point of not having them? I don't get it. He's got a good show, but with his brothers, it's a better show. Catherine told Frank he thought Michael was better when he performed his brothers. Frank laughed in her face. You're crazy, he told her. Imagine telling Michael's mother that she was crazy. Of course, she was offended. I'm not crazy, she shot back. The show would be better with the brothers, and that's that. Yeah, well, Frank said before walking off. Just prior to going on stage in Kansas City, Michael was handed a copy of The Star, a tabloid with the cover headline, Michael Jackson goes ape. Now he's talking with his pet chimp in monkey language. The story claimed that Michael was now obsessed with learning how to communicate with his pet monkey by making chip sounds. Did Frank plant this? Michael wants to know. Where did they get these pictures of me and Bubbles? Michael's age shrugged his shoulders. Well, I don't like it, Michael said. I don't want to see this. Don't show this kind of stuff before I go on stage. What the hell's the matter with you? Like many stories published about Michael, the tale of his fixation with Bubbles, a 3.5-year-old chimp who had been released to Michael from a cancer lab in 1985, was false. Michael enjoyed his ape the way he enjoys all of his animals, but even though Master and Ape sometimes eat together at the dinner table, good enough material for a story in of itself. One would think he wasn't speaking chimp language to his pet. Not that anyone knew anyway. Incidentally, contrary to some reports, there has only been one Bubbles, not a series of monkeys named Bubbles, just one. Catherine had been after Frank for months to stop promoting her son as Wacko Jacko. Schiller said, I spoke to him about it on numerous occasions. I know it was not a good idea, it was backfiring, but there was nothing I could do about it. Partly as a result of the bizarre image, Michael would cultivate, it seemed that some of his public had begun turn against him. Rolling Stone's readers voted him the worst artist in nearly every category in its yearly poll. Still, he hoped for some reputation at the Grammy Awards on March 2nd. He decided to perform on the telecast the first time in 5 years he had entertained on television. Michael wanted to erase all the negative publicity that had been trailing him and replace it with a positive image of him doing what he does best, said Bob Jones, Vice President of Communications for MJJ Productions. He wanted to prove to the world that he was serious about entertaining, that the very essence of him was a performer, not eccentric. He did it too. Anyone who saw his riveting performance that night would have to agree. He is an intensively competitive person. He wanted to leave an unforgettable impression of himself with the Academy and with his audience. However, after truly inspiring, observing performances of The Way He Made Me Feel and Man in the Mirror, Michael then had to visit in the first row of the Radio City Music Hall in full televised view of millions and suffered one humiliating defeat after another. Out of four nominations, Album of the Year, Best Male Pop Vocal, Best Male R&B Vocal Performance, and Producer of the Year, he had no wins. The last time Michael appeared at the Grammys with Thriller, he had received more awards, 8 of them, than anyone else in the history of the event. This time he got nothing. Most of all, he had craved the Grammy for Album of the Year for Bad. However, much to his dismay, U2 won it for the Joshua Tree. He couldn't have looked any more heartbroken if anyone had walked away with his pet ship, wrote Robert Hilburn, the Los Angeles Times pop music critic. He went back to the Hamzilla Palace where he was staying and cried. One friend said he and Frank had made a vow that they would at least win Album of the Year, and of course they didn't. He thought the whole thing was unfair. It wasn't about the music, it was about the image. Will the Academy give Record of the Year to a guy who sleeps in an oxygen chamber? Not likely. There is little time for Michael to feel sorry for himself, though. The next day, he was due to give a concert at Madison Square Garden. After the show, he and a representative from the Pepsi Cola Company, which had sponsored the band tour, represented a $600,000 check. The proceeds from the concert to the United College Fund. 4 years earlier, Michael had enjoyed a scholarship program at the UNCF with a portion of his earnings from the Elfay Victory Tour. By 1988, 70 students at UNCF member schools had received Michael Jackson scholarships. At some of the country's smaller black colleges, that could have been an entire graduating class. Michael maintained a low profile when it came to such donations. Perhaps of his generosity were better known. He would not have been so roundly criticized by many African Americans for not having a so called black consciousness. In truth, he has given many millions of dollars to black charities over the years. Most people who accompanied Michael and his tour also recall how generous he was to children who wanted to see him perform. At every concert stop on the tour, he had set aside a portion of tickets for underprivileged youngsters who otherwise would have been unable to attend his shows. All of the royalties from his number one single, Man in the Mirror, were donated to Camp Good Times, a charity for terminally ill patients in Los Angeles. Though his good deeds were going unnoticed, his insecurities were still getting the once over by the media. While on stage at Madison Square Garden, Michael shared a kiss with model Georgina Thompson, who appeared in his video, The Way You Make Me Feel. A week later, the photo showed up in the National Enquirer with the headline, Michael Jackson and model fall head over heels in love. The story said that Michael and Tatiana were having an affair, which is not true. Now that Michael's romance with backup artist Corinne Faye was over, the two were never romantically involved. There, the National Enquirer would run with the story that Michael saw Jesus Christ materialize from a cloud of smoke while he performed on stage. That same week, the Star would print that Michael had fallen in love with Princess Diana and wanted her to star in his next video. When Michael demands to know where these rumors come from, all fingers pointed at Frank DeLeo. By this time, though, Frank wasn't doing anything to promote such stories. The media was acting on its own, providing Michael with the image it felt he wanted. A favorite story among those in Michael's inner circle also appeared in the Inquirer. It claimed that Prince had used ESP to drive Bubbles the chimp crazy. Prince has gone too far this time, appears Michael was quoted to say in the article. What kind of sicko would mess with the monkey? This is the final straw. Poor Bubbles. Actually, Michael liked that one. John Burka and Frank DeLeo had never seen him laugh so much.